I always said I'd dedicate my life to games, not just sitting cross-legged in front of a TV at 3 in the morning, but really living inside them. The grind, the secrets, the feeling that I was doing something bigger than working a dead-end job or drifting through days that all looked the same. My parents thought it was just a phase. My last boyfriend said it was cute at first, until it wasn't. I didn't care. I told myself I'd find a way to turn it into something real. So when I saw the listing for a night shift at a Gamestop nobody in town talked about anymore, I knew I had to click apply. The ad looked normal enough. Dusty logo, bold letters begging for immediate help on the graveyard shift. The pay sucked. The hours were worse. But the post said one thing that made my heart race. Night shift only. Must love games. I remember scrolling through the comments under the ad. Everyone said the same thing. Don't do it. The place was haunted. Cursed. My favorite was the one that said the staff went missing sometimes, and corporate just hired new ones without asking questions. They joked about it like an urban legend. People vanish behind the shelves, ghosts run the register, Funko Pops move by themselves when the lights flicker. I laughed it off. I was bored, broke, and needed an excuse to stay awake all night anyway. What was a ghost going to do that my student loans hadn't already done? So I hit apply, uploaded a half-finished resume with my old high school GPA and a bunch of game titles under skills, and clicked send before I could change my mind. They called me 2 hours later. A guy with a voice like he hadn't slept in a week asked if I could come in that night. He didn't even ask if I'd worked retail before. I told him I'd be there. By the time the sun went down, I was standing behind the strip mall where the GameStop sat between an abandoned vape shop and a closed-down nail salon. The back door was propped open with a milk crate. The metal handle was sticky when I pushed it open, and the second I stepped inside, a cold gust hit my face. The smell was what I noticed first. Stale air, plastic, something sour buried under old carpet glue. Inside, the store looked like every GameStop I'd ever been in, just more tired. The walls were lined with used copies of games nobody played anymore. The TV above the counter glowed blue with the store's security feed, flickering like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay on. I stood there, clutching my backpack strap, waiting for someone to notice me. He came from the stockroom. Connor. He looked about my age, mid-20s, messy brown hair brushing the collar of a Fallout hoodie with holes at the cuffs. His glasses were taped at the bridge. He smiled like we were about to boot up co-op mode. "You made it," he said, holding out his hand. His palm was warm and dry, his grip soft but tired. "I'm Connor." "Night lead? You must be." I told him my name and he repeated it like he was saving it to memory. He glanced at the security feed, which hissed with static, then looked back at me and grinned. "Congrats," he said. "You're officially one of us." "One of who?" I asked. I tried to sound casual, but my voice cracked a little. The back room hummed with an old mini fridge, and somewhere in the store, something metal clinked like a shelf settling. Connor tapped my shoulder with the back of his hand, nodding to the rows of dusty shelves. The night crew. The last line of defense between these relics and oblivion. I laughed. He didn't. He turned toward the register, motioning for me to follow. The place felt bigger at night, the aisles stretching longer than they should have. I caught my reflection in a glass display. Pale, wide-eyed, my backpack hanging off one shoulder like I was about to bail if things got too weird. Connor stopped by a stack of Funko Pops nobody would ever buy and looked at me over his shoulder. "You know the rumors?" he asked. "Haunted GameStop?" I said, grinning. "Sure, urban legends." He didn't smile back. He just nodded once, like he was checking something off a list. "Yeah," he said. "Urban legends." I looked past him at the flickering TV feed above the counter. One of the cameras caught a weird shape in the PS aisle, like a shadow bent over a shelf. Before I could ask, Connor clapped his hands once, loud enough to echo through the dead store. "First things first," he said. "We stalk, we alphabetize, we survive the night." He didn't explain that last part. I didn't ask. I just smiled back, feeling my heartbeat in my ears, wondering how deep into this game I'd just stepped. The first hour of my shift passed in that weird silence you only get when it's way too late to be awake, but you know you can't sleep. Connor showed me where the shrink wrap cutter was, how to scan in new shipments that hadn't come in for years, and which shelves made that creaking sound when you leaned on them too hard. We stocked rows of Funko Pops, the same ones that sat there every day, unmoving, unbought, their blank eyes staring at us like they were judging every time we breathed wrong. Connor told me not to bother dusting them. He said they liked the dust. I laughed, but he didn't. He just moved on to alphabetizing old PS2 games, humming under his breath. I watched him for a while when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He'd check the security feed every few minutes, eyes darting from one flickering camera to the next. Sometimes he'd tap the monitor with his knuckle, that like he was trying to warn whatever was on the other side. I pretended not to notice. We ended up behind the counter, sitting cross-legged on the stained carpet. He tore open a bag of off-brand chips from the break room and handed me one. It tasted stale but warm in my mouth, and I realized I hadn't eaten all day. "You've done night shifts before?" Connor asked, pushing up his taped glasses with his thumb. "Only at a gas station," I said. "Got robbed once, by a guy in a Pikachu hoodie, so yeah, I've seen some stuff." He actually laughed at that, which made me feel like maybe this place wasn't so weird after all. The hum of the lights overhead buzzed like an old console left running too long. I looked around at the shelves, the glass cases, the cardboard cutouts of smiling characters frozen in outdated poses. It all felt normal, but not normal enough to feel safe. Connor tilted his head at me, that half-smile back on his lips. "You ever hear about the Guild?" he asked. "Is that like the employee union?" I said, half joking. He didn't laugh this time. He leaned back on his elbows, eyes drifting up to the ceiling. There was a dark stain right above the register. It looked like water damage, if water damage could drip in the shape of a man stretching out his arms. I followed his gaze, my stomach tightening. Connor tapped my knee with 2 fingers to get my attention again. "People talk about the ghosts," that he said. "The cult rumors, the missing kids, all that nonsense online, but nobody talks about the Guild." He said it like it was supposed to mean something big. I waited for him to explain, but he just looked at me, letting the silence build up until it felt heavy in my chest. "It's real?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Connor's eyes flicked to the security feed behind me. The screen stuttered with static, then settled on an empty aisle. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing by the PS section, but when I blinked, it was gone. "It's real," he said finally. "Or it's not. Doesn't really matter. What matters is the rules." I frowned. "Rules for what?" Connor pushed himself up, brushing chip crumbs off his hoodie. He grabbed a battered notebook from under the counter and held it out like it was made of gold. The cover was peeling, the edges curled and stained with what looked like old coffee and maybe something darker. There was a red pen tucked into the spine. "This," he said, tapping it with his knuckle, "is how you survive the night shift. You follow the rules, you go home. Break them, you don't." I took the notebook, felt the soft, worn leather under my fingertips. It was heavier than it looked. When I flipped it open, the first page was covered in messy handwriting, notes scribbled in red ink, doodles of game logos and stick figures that didn't look quite right. Connor sat next to me again, leaning so close I could smell stale Monster Energy on his breath. "Every shift lead passes it down," he said. "I got it from Manny. Manny got it from Jess. Jess got it from someone before her. You'll add your part when you're ready." I turned another page. More scribbles, more rules. A small drawing of a guy in a polo shirt holding what looked like a receipt book. Underneath it, "The Pre-Order King." Connor reached over and flipped the page back to the first one. "Not yet," he said. "Tonight, you just need to know they're real. That stain up there? First clue. The cameras? Second clue. You'll see more. But you stick by me. You don't break the rules. You'll be fine." I looked up at the ceiling stain again, then at Connor. He looked tired, but not afraid. Like he'd been doing this for so long that fear was just another shelf to dust. "Okay," I said, voice soft. "So we stalk, and we follow the rules." Connor grinned and reached out his hand again. I shook it, feeling the pen pressed into my palm as he did. "Welcome to the Guild," he said. Somewhere behind us, the PS aisle light flickered once, then twice, then held steady. I felt the notebook grow heavier in my lap, and for the first time that night, I wondered if maybe the rumors were right. Maybe I really had just clocked in for the last time. I didn't sleep when I got home that morning. I tried, crawled under my blanket, shut the blinds, put on some old speed runs in the background like I always did, but my brain wouldn't shut up. I kept thinking about the ceiling stain and the static in the security feed. The notebook sat on my nightstand, half hidden under a stack of game cases, but it felt like it was staring at me every time I cracked one eye open. By the time I came back for my next shift, I'd read the whole thing twice. The pages were thin and smelled like stale coffee and dust. Some parts were written in the same cramped handwriting over and over, the same warnings repeated in different ways. Some pages were torn out completely, edges jagged, like someone didn't want the next person to see what they'd written. Connor was waiting for me when I pushed open the back door. He sat cross-legged on a beanbag he'd dragged behind the counter, a half-empty can of Monster in his hand. He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes and that tired smile I was already starting to trust too much. "You read it?" he asked. I dropped my backpack and sat on the floor next to him. The carpet smelled worse tonight, like old gum and mildew. "Yeah," I said, twice. Connor tipped the can toward me like a toast. I shook my head. He shrugged and set it aside. "Good," he said. "Means you'll survive tonight." He held out his hand and I slapped the notebook into it. He flipped it open like it was muscle memory, found the first page and held it between us. "Okay," he said, voice low. "Rule 1, easiest one we got. You break it, you're done." I leaned closer, reading the heading I'd already memorized. 1. The Pre-Order King. Connor tapped the tiny sketch, a man in a polo shirt holding a receipt book, eyes drawn as empty circles. "He'll show up right after closing," Connor said. "Acts normal, talks normal, looks normal. Might even look like a guy you went to high school with. But he isn't." I nodded, trying to match his serious tone, even though part of me still wanted to laugh at how dramatic it all sounded. "He'll ask if you want to pre-order something," Connor went on. "Always say yes or maybe, or lie. Say you already did. Never say no." He paused like he was waiting for me to interrupt. I didn't. He pointed up to the ceiling, right where that stain stretched out its arms above the register. "That's what happens if you say no," he said. I swallowed hard, eyes flicking between the stain and the sketch. I didn't want to know the details. I didn't ask. Connor turned the page. The paper crackled like dry leaves. The next sketch was messier. A girl crouched low, hair covering her face, tangled lines where her hands should be. Number 2, the midnight release girl. That's the one I saw. PS section. She was digging through old boxes. Connor's shoulders stiffened. He clicked his tongue, pushed his glasses up again. "Yeah," he said. "She wants to be first. Always wants to be first. Died waiting for a midnight release that never dropped. If you see her, don't sneak up. Never come up behind her. She thinks you're cutting the line." "And?" "She hates line cutters," Connor said, voice flat. "Don't give her a reason." He flipped another page. This one made my skin crawl. A Polaroid was taped to it, a faded photo of Connor or someone who looked exactly like him. Same hoodie, same tired eyes, but something in the smile was wrong. Too wide, too hungry. 3. The trade-in twin. "Sometimes you'll see me when I'm not here," Connor said. "Might wave you over. He might try to trade you a used game or something. Never take it. Not even a finger." "What happens if you do?" I asked. "You get traded in," he said. "You become part of the guild. They keep you here. Forever." He looked away when he said it. I didn't press him. The beanbag squeaked when he shifted his weight, the smell of stale soda drifting up when he kicked an empty can aside. He leaned closer, flipping another page. The next sketch was just static lines, scribbles like a broken TV screen. At the top, written in thick red ink, 4. The beta tester. I felt my stomach turn, remembering the flicker I'd seen on the security feed my first night. That itch to look closer. To see what my brain knew I shouldn't see. 2:13 a.m. every night, Connor said. "Doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter where you are, the beta tester checks the feed. You'll feel it, that itch to look. Don't. If you see him see you, he gets out. If he gets out, you go in." He snapped the notebook shut so fast, the pages slapped together like a trap closing on a mouse. "That's enough for tonight," he said. "You know the first 4. The others can wait." I looked down at my hands, felt sweat pooling in my palms. The store around us hummed, lights buzzing, shelves creaking like old bones. Somewhere in the back, I heard the faint click of a display case opening by itself. Connor reached out and tapped the cover of the notebook with one bitten nail. "When you're ready," he said, voice calm but heavy, "you'll write your part." "Everyone does." He stood up, held out his hand. I grabbed it and let him pull me to my feet. My legs felt shaky, like I'd been crouched in the same boss fight for hours with no save point. Together, we looked out at the aisles, rows of games nobody wanted, shadows stretching too long under the flickering lights. I felt the notebook's weight in my hands. I knew I'd never look at this place the same way again. The notebook stayed under the counter that night. I tucked it between the old receipt printer and a stack of cracked PS3 cases, trying not to look at it every 5 seconds. Connor had gone to the back to do inventory, or at least that's what he said. I knew he just needed a break from my questions. I couldn't blame him. The store felt different when I was alone. The air pressed heavier against my skin, like the walls were leaning closer when I wasn't paying attention. I heard the hum of the fridge in the break room, the soft buzz of the old security monitors, and the distant rattle of something shifting in the Xbox aisle. Maybe just a box settling. Or maybe not. I checked my phone. Dead, of course. The ancient outlet by the counter flickered when I tried to plug in my charger. I glanced at the time clock near the door, the green numbers blinking softly, daring me to think about leaving. I didn't even get close. Closing time came and went. I did my rounds, pretending to fix rows of dusty used games nobody ever touched. My feet stuck to a patch of old soda behind the register. The ceiling stain looked worse tonight, stretched wider, like someone had pressed wet hands against the tiles and dragged them apart. When the last customer left, a real one this time, some teenager trading in a scratched FIFA disc for pennies, I locked the front door and flipped the sign. The lights over the aisles dimmed on their own. That was normal. I was counting Funko Pops at the front display when I heard the door chime. Once, twice, I froze. The door was locked. Nobody should have been able to come in. I turned, slow enough that my spine felt like it was cracking. And there he was. A man stood by the register. Mid-30s, maybe. Polo shirt tucked too tight into khaki pants. A receipt book in his hand. The carbon pages yellowed and curling at the edges. He didn't smile. Didn't blink. "Hey," he said, voice soft, almost polite. "You open?" I swallowed so hard it hurt. I forced my mouth to move. "Sorry, just closed up," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "System's down for the night." He didn't react. He just flipped the receipt book open, ran one finger down the page like he was looking for my name. "You want to pre-order something?" he asked. My throat went dry. I heard Connor's voice in my head. "Never say no." I shifted my weight, tried to look busy, eyes darting to the stain above us. I swore it was dripping now, something dark crawling along the edge. "Already did," I said quickly. "Got a few locked in. Big releases. All set." He paused, looked up at me. His eyes were pale, like the color had been washed out by too many fluorescent lights. He nodded once, flipping the receipt book shut with a soft snap. "Good," he said. "Good gamer." He turned, took 2 steps toward the door. I swear the lock clicked open on its own. The bell above the door gave one small, tired ring. Then he was gone. I pressed my hand against the counter to keep from shaking. I felt the stale sweat on my neck. My breath sounded too loud in my own ears. I wanted to call Connor, yell for him to come up front, but I was afraid to raise my voice. I glanced at the ceiling stain. It looked the same as before. No fresh drip. But my shoes stuck to the tile a little when I stepped back, like something invisible had settled on them. I turned to check the monitors behind the counter. Most showed empty aisles, dusty shelves, piles of old cables, cardboard standees for games that released before I could drive. But the bottom right screen flickered. Static fuzzed the edges. A shape moved behind the fuzz. Long arms, hunched shoulders, the glitch of a head turning sideways. I felt that itch, the one Connor warned me about. That deep, gnawing curiosity that makes you lean in just to see better. The beta tester. I reached for the keyboard, fingertips hovering over the dusty keys. One tap and I could switch cameras. One click and I could see him clearly. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw hurt. My reflection in the black glass of the unplugged TV above the counter stared back at me. It looked more tired than I felt. I backed away. I turned the monitor to face the wall. A trick Connor had shown me when I asked too many questions my first night. If you can't see it, it can't see you. In the silence that followed, I thought I heard the faint buzz of a voice behind the static. I pressed my hands over my ears, counting backward from 10 like I used to when my anxiety got too big to handle. When I opened my eyes, the flicker was gone. The shape on the screen didn't come back. The only thing that stared back at me was my own reflection, stretched thin by too many sleepless nights and too many secrets. Connor came back an hour later, a box of expired snack bars in his arms. He dropped them behind the counter, gave me one look, and nodded when he saw the monitor turned away. "You did good," he said. "No questions. No lectures." I didn't say anything back. I just sat there on the cold floor behind the register, clutching that battered notebook like it was the only thing keeping me in this world and not whatever waited on the other side of the static. I wish I could say the rest of that shift was quiet, but at this place, the quiet always feels like something holding its breath, waiting for you to slip. Connor disappeared into the stockroom again after he saw the monitor turned. He didn't say much, just gave me that tired nod like we both knew the night wasn't done testing me yet. I sat behind the counter for a while, knees pulled to my chest, notebook pressed against my thigh. I thought about clocking out, just picking up my bag, pushing the back door open, and never coming back. But I knew I wouldn't. Gamers never quit. We just respawn. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt stiff, my head buzzing from hours of stale store air and the hum of the old security TV. I grabbed the broom, started sweeping the aisles just to keep my hands busy. I told myself I'd just do one loop, check the PS section where the midnight release girl liked to hide, peek at the bargain bins near the register, then circle back and wake Connor up if he'd passed out on a stack of cardboard boxes again. I turned the corner near the bargain bin and froze. He was there. Maybe 10 or 11. Hoodie sleeves too long for his skinny arms. The kid was crouched low, back pressed against the end cap of half-priced Xbox games. He held something in his lap, a big, beat-up paperback with a torn cover. I knew what it was before I got close enough to see the words. Prima Official Game Guide. His eyes were wide and pale, like he hadn't blinked in years. He looked up at me and tilted the book toward me, almost shy. The pages fluttered open on their own. "Read," he said, voice like static under a blanket. My throat closed up. I knew this one. The strategy guide, kid. Rule number 5. If he offers, nod. Never read it here. Never read it out loud. I swallowed, trying not to look at the words printed on the pages. I caught a glimpse, just a few lines, something about secret codes, cheat menus, the kind of stuff I used to memorize when I was his age. He pushed the book closer, tiny fingers white-knuckling the edges. I forced my feet to stay planted. Every instinct said run, but the rules were clear. "Not right now," I said softly. "I'll read it later, okay? I promise." His head tilted to the side. His hoodie shifted, and I swear I saw pages instead of skin under the fabric, lines of tiny black text crawling up his neck like veins. "Later," he repeated. I nodded, quick but steady. "Yeah, later." Crossed my heart. The kid stared at me for what felt like an hour. Then slowly, he pulled the book back into his chest and curled tighter against the shelf. He didn't speak again. He didn't blink. He just faded a little, like a flicker on an old TV. Still there, but not really there. My knees were shaking when I turned away. I backed down the aisle, broom clutched in one hand like it was a sword that could actually protect me from whatever else lived between these shelves. I ducked into the break room, not because I needed a snack or a drink, but because it was the only door that locked from the inside. I kicked a stack of old cardboard aside and sat on the cracked vinyl chair in the corner. The break room smelled like stale pizza and burnt microwave popcorn that had fused to the ceiling tiles 10 managers ago. On the little table in the center sat the old CRT TV and a tangled mess of cables. The console hooked up to it buzzed softly, the ancient hum of a LAN match frozen in time. I didn't need to see the screen to know who was in there. The LAN party bro. Rule number 6. Don't interrupt him. Don't stand in front of the TV. If he talks to you, talk back. Just never pull the plug. I leaned back and peered at the screen. Halo 2. Split screen. A player icon spun in circles while plasma grenades bounced off empty corridors. I could smell the stale Monster Energy cans hidden behind the broken mini fridge, the ghost of bad pizza crust left to rot under the table legs. I heard him before I saw him. A low laugh, clipped and echoey like a headset mic picking up background noise. The air felt thicker when he spoke. "Got next?" he asked. Voice hoarse like he'd been yelling into the mic for hours that turned into years. I forced a smile, even though my mouth was dry. "Not tonight, man. Just watching." The icon on screen jumped. He laughed again. A can somewhere behind the fridge rattled. Then he went quiet, headset static filling the silence like distant storm clouds. I sat there for a while longer, watching the same corridor loop on the old TV. I counted my breath, reminded myself that dawn always comes, even if you're stuck waiting in a dead match that never ends. When I finally stood, my knees cracked loud enough to echo. The LAN party bro didn't say goodbye. I slipped back into the main store, broom still in hand like I'd actually done some work. Somewhere near the bargain bin, the strategy guide kid was gone. The air felt colder where he'd been, like the pages had sucked the warmth out of the carpet. I stepped behind the counter, pressed my palm flat against the notebook under the register. I closed my eyes and breathed. Half the rules down, half to go. Connor always said the worst part of this job wasn't the ghosts or the rules, it was training the new kids. He told me that when I asked why he never put out the now hiring sign himself. Corporate did that for him. When they needed fresh blood, they found it. So when the back door creaked open and Brian stepped inside, I knew right away he was the next one. He looked exactly like I'd expected. College freshman maybe, fresh hoodie with the tags still poking out at the back of his neck, hair gelled up like he'd just come from a dorm party that wasn't as fun as he pretended. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder and that wide grin people wear when they think nothing bad ever happens to them. He stuck out his hand like we were at some normal retail store, and for a second, I almost wished we were. "You must be the manager," he said. "Brian, they called me this morning, said you needed help." I shook his hand. His grip was too tight, trying too hard to look confident. "Not the manager," I said. "Just the one who'll keep you alive tonight." He laughed like I'd told a joke. He looked past me at the rows of dusty shelves, the flickering monitors, the stain on the ceiling. "This place is a dump," he said, voice too loud for how dead the store was. "Haunted Gamestop, right? I read that thread. You really buy into that?" I didn't bother answering. I pulled the notebook from under the counter and slapped it onto the glass between us. The red pen rolled out and stopped by his elbow. "What's this?" he asked, flipping it open without permission. "Rules," I said. "You follow them. You go home. Break them. You don't." He laughed again, but softer this time. He flipped a few pages, eyes skimming the messy handwriting. I watched his grin fade when he hit the Polaroid of Connor's trade-in twin. He looked up at me like he expected me to say it was just a prank. Before I could explain more, the door chime rang. My stomach turned. I knew that sound too well now. The pre-order king stood by the register, polo crisp, receipt book in hand, eyes pale and polite. Brian looked at him, then back at me, then barked out a nervous laugh. "Hey man, we're closed," he said, waving him off like he was some lost dad wandering in after hours. I felt the color drain from my face. "Brian," I started. He held up a hand, cutting me off. "No worries, I got this. Sir, we're not taking pre-orders tonight. Come back tomorrow, all right?" The king didn't move, he just flipped his receipt book open, pen poised like he was about to write Brian's name in blood. Brian raised his eyebrows and turned to me, waiting for me to back him up. I did the only thing I could think of. I stepped forward, blocking Brian with my arm. "I already pre-ordered," I said quickly. "For both of us, big releases, locked in, all done." The king's eyes flicked from me to Brian, then back to me. He closed his receipt book with that soft final snap. "Good," he said. "Good gamer." He turned and left, door chime echoing through the store like an old ringtone no one had bothered to silence. Brian exhaled a shaky laugh. He looked at me like he was starting to understand this wasn't just some prank. "What was that?" he asked, voice low now. "That was strike one," I said. "Don't say no, ever." He looked ready to argue, but before he could speak, the security feed behind us flickered. The bottom camera hissed with static, that same shape flickering behind the fuzz. Long arms, glitching shoulders, something trying to pull itself out of the screen. Brian leaned in, squinting. "Hey, what's wrong with that one?" he asked, reaching for the keyboard. I grabbed his wrist so fast he flinched. "Don't," I hissed. He tried to laugh it off, but his eyes were wide. He tugged his hand free and stepped back, staring at me like I'd grown an extra head. Fine. This is what, like store hazing or something. I didn't bother answering. I turned the monitor to face the wall. The screen hissed once more and went quiet. Brian ran a hand through his hair, his laugh dry and empty now. "Is this place for real?" he asked. I pointed to the notebook still open on the counter. He looked down at the next rule, the scribbled lines about the beta tester, the hours marked in shaky red ink. "It's real," I said. "And if you want to see tomorrow, you'll start listening." He didn't argue this time. He just nodded, eyes flicking to the stain on the ceiling that seemed a little bigger than before. He closed the notebook with shaking fingers and pushed it back to me like it burned to touch. We both heard the break room door creak open by itself, the smell of stale monster drifting out into the aisles. The LAN party bro, restless behind his flickering screen. Brian's laugh broke somewhere deep in his throat. "Tell me there's more rules," he whispered. "There's always more," I said. And when he asked me if I ever thought about quitting, I didn't answer. I just handed him the red pen and told him he'd understand when he was ready to write his own part. Brian stayed close after that. He didn't ask to see the notebook again. He didn't crack jokes about urban legends or try to peek at the monitors when they flickered. He just trailed behind me while we did the dumb work, restacking bargain bin games, wiping fingerprints off plastic cases that hadn't sold in years, pretending we were normal employees in a normal store. I could tell he was trying to convince himself it was all some hazing ritual. But his eyes kept darting to the ceiling's stain when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd flinch every time the door chime creaked behind us, even though the sign still said closed and the lock hadn't moved. By 3:30, the store had settled into that weird half-silence. The Funko Pops watched us from their dusty shelf. The LAN party bros' laugh drifted through the break room door every so often, a low echo that made Brian jump every time. I offered him a stale snack bar from the break room stash, but he didn't eat it. He just clutched it like a kid holds a flashlight in a dark basement. I checked the clock on my phone, 4:50 a.m., an hour until dawn. One more hour. "Almost there," I told him, trying to sound like I believed it. "Just stick close. Don't look at the feeds. Don't wander. We're good." He gave me a stiff nod. His eyes were bloodshot, same as mine probably were the first night. We both jumped when the security feed on the counter let out a single soft beep, the kind of beep it never made at this hour. I turned to look. The feed was frozen on the front register, the same angle we saw every night. Only this time, someone was standing there, someone who looked exactly like me. Brian leaned closer before I could stop him, his breath caught in his throat. "Is that you?" he whispered. It wasn't just me on the screen, it was me right now. Same hoodie. Same ponytail slipping out the back of my cap. Same chipped nail polish on my fingers tapping the edge of the time clock. I swallowed the taste of metal in my mouth. My teeth hurt from clenching them. "The final boss," I said, voice low. "Last rule. The worst one." Brian turned to me, pale under the store's sickly lights. "What does it do?" I forced my eyes off the feed. I didn't want to see the other me tilt her head or smile wrong or blink when I didn't. "It waits," I said. "It waits for your shift to end. It waits for you to clock out. If you do it when it's standing there, you don't go home." Brian shook his head like a kid refusing medicine. "What do you mean? It's just a..." "Brian." I grabbed his wrist, squeezed hard enough that he winced. "Listen, if you see yourself at the register, you run. You do not clock out. You survive until dawn." He tried to pull free, but I didn't let go. He looked at the monitor again. I felt him stiffen. I knew without turning that the thing on screen had moved, probably closer to the time clock. "Did you ever see it before?" he asked, voice cracking. "Once," I said. "When I started. Connor grabbed me before I could swipe my card. He saved me. Now we save each other." Brian's eyes darted to the back room like he expected Connor to appear any second. But Connor wasn't here. He hadn't come out since he slipped behind the stockroom door hours ago. Brian's breathing turned ragged, sharp little gasps he was trying to keep quiet. The monitor beeped again. I couldn't help it. I turned to look. The other me stood at the counter now, right where the time clock glowed green. She looked straight at the camera, head tilted just a fraction too far to the side. Her mouth twitched into a smile. Too wide, too many teeth. "Don't move," I whispered. Brian flinched when the real time behind the counter chimed. Soft, cheerful, like it did when you ended your shift. Insert card to clock out. I felt my hand twitch toward my lanyard, that dumb plastic card with my name and fake job title. I shoved my hands into my pockets, forcing them to stay there. Brian stepped back, bumping into a cardboard display for some used sports game nobody wanted. The standee tipped, rattling loud enough to echo through the aisles. On the monitor, the other me turned her head. Not fast, not slow, just wrong, like a broken frame in a cutscene. Her eyes locked on Brian. "Don't look at her," I hissed. Brian's breath stuttered. His eyes darted between the monitor and me. Real me, fake me. The door to the break room squeaked behind us. I felt the stale rush of cold air, the faint laugh of the LAN party bro drifting out like static. I grabbed Brian's arm and yanked him behind the counter. We ducked under the register shelf, squeezing into the narrow crawl space that smelled like dust and stale carpet cleaner. Brian's heartbeat hammered through his hoodie sleeve. His breath ticked in my ear, too loud, too scared. Above us, the soft chime of the time clock sang again. Insert card to clock out. I pressed my palm over Brian's mouth when he started to whisper. We both held our breath when we heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, padding across the cheap vinyl floor behind the counter. My own voice floated above us, humming. A note that didn't exist, just the same tune I used to hum when I needed to calm myself down. Brian squeezed his eyes shut. I felt him trembling. I mouthed the words, "Don't move, don't clock out." The humming faded. The footsteps paused by the register. The time clock clicked once, then twice. A soft, polite beep like an old game over screen. Then silence. We stayed under there until our legs cramped and my knees felt like they were grinding into the concrete through the thin carpet. When I finally peeked over the counter, the register was empty. The time clock blinked back to its idle screen. The monitor showed only static where my copy had stood. Brian crawled out after me, hands shaking, face pale and damp with sweat. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. He knew now. The final boss wasn't just a story. The last rule was real, and we still had an hour to go. I don't remember crawling out from under that counter. My knees were numb, my back stiff from crouching on sticky carpet that smelled like stale mop water and old gum. Brian's face looked worse than mine, pale under the flickering register lights, eyes darting around like he expected to see another me stepping out from behind a shelf. The clock above the break room door ticked so loud it felt like someone tapping on my skull. Just 30 more minutes. That's all we needed. 30 minutes until dawn. 30 minutes until the guild went quiet again, at least for a few hours. Brian wiped his palms on his hoodie, eyes fixed on the green glow of the time clock. He flinched every time it chimed its cheerful little beep. Insert card to clock out. "Don't even think about it," I whispered. He nodded too fast. His laugh sounded like a cough. He stepped away from the counter, pressed his back to the glass display, where we locked up the rare used games nobody ever asked about. We both stood there, silent, listening to the low hum of the old lights overhead. The aisles stretched out in front of us. Shadows pooled around cardboard cutouts that hadn't moved in years. Or maybe they had. I didn't trust them anymore. Somewhere by the PS aisle, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. I knew what that meant before I saw the shadow. The midnight release girl. Rule 2. Brian saw my eyes shift and turned to look, too fast. "Brian," I hissed, but it was too late. He peeked around the corner, just enough to see her hunched low in the aisle. Her hair hung over her face in stringy clumps, hands moving through empty cases for a game that never dropped. She sniffed the air, a soft, wet sound that made my stomach twist. Brian froze. He pulled back like he'd touched a live wire. "She saw me," he whispered. I grabbed his sleeve, dragged him behind a display. The lights above the PS section clicked off, all at once, like someone hit a switch behind the walls. "Stay here," I breathed. "Don't run, don't move." He clutched my wrist like I was the last thing tethering him to the living. The silence in the store changed, not louder, not quieter, just thicker, like breathing through cotton. I heard her footsteps scuff the linoleum, slow and careful, weaving through the aisles. I kept my eyes locked on Brian's face. I didn't dare peek. He tried to breathe through his nose, but every gasp came out too sharp, too real. A shape moved just behind the corner of the shelf. I saw the edge of her hair, black and limp under the dying aisle light. She paused, sniffed the air again. Her fingers brushed the floor, dirty nails scraping the old sticker residue nobody bothered to mop up. She turned away, slithered back toward the dark PS section, folding herself between shelves like a shadow sinking into old game cases that hadn't been touched since before I ever worked a shift. Brian's grip loosened. He pressed his forehead to the glass of the display. His breath fogged the cracked plastic. "Will it ever stop?" he asked, voice so small it made my chest hurt. I looked past him, at the security feed where static flickered between empty aisles. For a second, I thought I saw the strategy guide kid crouched in the bargain bin again, pages fluttering without wind. By the break room door, I caught the hum of the old CRT, the LAN party bro, still trapped in his match that never ended. And the ceiling stain above the register looked darker tonight, stretched wide like arms waiting to pull someone up. "No," I said, "not for us." Brian made a noise in his throat, a sound that wanted to be a laugh, but wasn't. He forced his mouth into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "We're gamers, right?" he said. I smiled back. I didn't know if it looked real. "Yeah," I said. "We're gamers." Behind Brian, I caught my reflection in the glass of the register screen. For a heartbeat, I thought it smiled wider than I did. Teeth too straight, too many, mouth not mine at all. The time clock chimed one last time, insert card to clock out. The green light blinked. The stain on the ceiling didn't drip, didn't twitch, it just waited. The glass doors at the front of the store glowed faintly. A wash of early dawn light peeked over the parking lot's cracked asphalt. The Funko Pops on the shelf stared back at me, blank eyes reflecting the first threads of daylight. I pressed my palm to Brian's shoulder. "It's over," I whispered. He turned to look at the door, the sliver of real light that felt like the only thing in the world that couldn't glitch or flicker or whisper secrets in the dark. Together, we stepped out from behind the counter. We didn't touch the time clock. We didn't even look at it. We just let it blink behind us. Soft, cheerful, patient. It would still be there tonight. It always was. I slipped the battered notebook from under the register and shoved it into my backpack. Brian's eyes followed it like it was a bomb I'd stuffed between stale snack bars and broken pens. "You'll write your part," I told him. "When you're ready." He didn't argue. He didn't laugh. He just nodded, eyes wide and wet. Outside, the morning air hit my face like cold water. The sun cracked over the cheap strip mall roof, throwing pale light across the parking lot where no one ever parked after dark. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't say "see you tonight." We just stood there a second, watching our breath in the cold dawn, listening to the door behind us swing shut. Inside, the store hummed. Shelves creaked, monitors flickered, ghosts waited behind cardboard standees and bargain bins. They'd be waiting for us when the sun went down again. And we'd clock in. Because that's what gamers do. We keep playing the game.